Hi, this is Del Singh at Late Night Banter. Trust you're enjoying the bants, and don't forget you can see loads more at latenightbanter.com. I want to talk about selfish people, and probably some of the most selfish people I tend to encounter seem to be the guys and ladies that stand outside a public building smoking. Yeah, they usually do it actually under a sign that says no smoking. So smoking doesn't obviously just affect your lungs and whatever, it also affects your eyesight and makes you pretty stupid too. And I say they're selfish because you know what, they actually stand right in the way, so you've got to walk all the way through them and inhale that pall of muck and get it in your clothes and everything else. You know, there are some considerate folk, they move a little bit further away, but these guys won't. In fact, you know, if they moved into the fast lane of the M1, I don't think I'd be too distressed. You know, they've got this simple mantra, which is, you know, it's my right to smoke. You know, how dare you? You've kind of like turned me into a pariah because I have to go outside these days. You know, it's my right to die. And guess what? I'm going to take a few of you with me. So inhale. As Sikhs, we don't smoke. I've never smoked. In fact, it's actually abhorrent. The smell of that stuff really puts me off. So, you know, the founders of the Sikh religion obviously knew a thing or two about smoking, whether it was the health or just the idea that it was a nasty habit. They got it right. So, you know, I'm certainly down on smokers. I think considerate people, if you want to smoke, great. Probably a bit like considerate drinkers, or let's say throwing a double Jack Daniels in your face, you don't seem to notice it too much. And then there's of course the vapors. Yep, you've seen them. They normally look like people who are on fire because they're just this cloud of smoke. They've got their own microclimate surrounding them because that's what the bubble they live in. It's supposed to be healthier, I don't know for who, but it certainly isn't very trendy. I mean, guys, you look stupid. You know, if the Marlboro Man was all about, you know, a guy with a cigarette looking cool as a cowboy and so on, how cool is it holding something that looks like a piccolo and an Airwick air freshener? It's not. It just looks daft, yeah? And you inhale it and then you get this pall of smoke. And also, if you've seen somebody vaping in a car, it really does look like the thing is literally alight. So you do want to call 999. And then the ads, they try to entice people, which is, you know, enjoy the vaping with flavours like cherry and vanilla and butterscotch. Butterscotch? Really? Have you actually been anywhere near somebody smoking one of those things? You know, in India they have a thing called, it's one of them, they're still in certain villages they use it for cooking. It's a cow pat. It's called goya. And actually the smell of a vapour is very much like a cow pat. A butterscotch flavoured cow pat. It's disgusting, guys, and you look daft. But hey, guess what? Carry on vaping as long as you're not doing it outside a train station, a hospital or an airport. Like, I don't really care. And then the most inconsiderate folk of all are tokers. You know, these are the 420 people that want to just smoke cannabis in plain sight. You know, yep, it's our right to actually light up and smoke dope as dopes anywhere we like. And the crazy thing is, you know what they do? They try to hide it by pulling down the brim of their cap. You're not anonymous. The stuff's called skunk. We can smell it about 3 miles away. We know you're smoking weed. You know, it's crazy stuff. I mean, I've got this a week or two ago when I was running in London. You know, the crowds are cheering you on, you're actually aching, and then there's some guy standing there actually blowing cannabis smoke into the space of runners. Now, some may have liked it because it may have numbed their pain. For me, it was horrible because not only do I not like it, but I've then found it very difficult to actually run past that 6-foot pink rabbit on a tricycle. I don't think I was high, I think there really was a 6-foot pink rabbit on a tricycle. But anyway, you know, it's all about not being so selfish, guys. Come on, if you want to smoke, have a go, but do it somewhere else. So that's the gripe, that's the whinge. This is Banter, and as I say, let banter commence. Hello and welcome to Late Night Banter with me, Del Singh. My guest this evening is Ranjit Banwait, who is leader of Derby City Council. Ranjit, welcome to Late Night Banter.
Hello, Del. Thank you for inviting me.
Ranjit, just a little bit about your background before we get kind of into the politics and what you do with Derby City Council. Your background, your family actually from India, from Punjab, and I believe they're sugarcane farmers. Is that true? Is that an urban myth somewhere? Did I read that from wrong?
Yeah, my parents are from a village near Namasher, in the Punjab. And Simbli.
Okay, so you obviously know quite a bit about this. How connected are you with that?
Well, at a time when you could go on holiday for months and months,
okay.
Now it's obviously illegal to do that.
Okay.
You can't even go to Benidorm for a week during school term. And
definitely not. And you can't condone that. Yeah.
I went to India when I was so I was born in '71.
Right.
I went to India when I was 3. Obviously, don't remember it.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the photographs, and but my dad was one of those Sikhs that didn't go back too much because obviously he was busy working.
Yeah.
But when he did take us on a family holiday, we went in 1981, and we went for 3 months.
Okay.
So we actually said to the school we were going for 3 months
Okay.
during obviously school term. So it was about November '81. And at that time, you just needed to take a note to the T-shirt and just say, "Look, I'm off to India.
I'm off sick for 3 months."
Well, we were honest. We said, "Look, we're going to India on a family holiday."
Right.
And the note said, "Yes, and I'll take my English maths book with me, and I'll make sure I do some work." And it was as simple as that.
Suckers, they believed him.
Yeah. So we went on 3 months, and actually then my dad extended it.
Okay.
So so we were, I look back now, and I obviously went on holiday, but actually I was living there.
You were living there,
I was living there, and I didn't do much studying, I have to say.
I wondered,
but recently, it was only last year, chatting to my sisters, that I found out that when I came back, my sisters didn't go, it was just me and my brother and my mum and dad. My sister stayed behind with my grandparents. But it's only recently I found out my sister said, when you came back, you had a strong Indian accent.
Really?
Now I didn't know that.
You wouldn't do.
So he said, "Yeah, you just chatted just like somebody just right from India, So that's something that the sisters were teasing me about.
So let's just fast forward. So obviously, you went to university in Kent, I believe. You kind of spent time living in London, but you're here in Derby. Is it fair to say Derby is your spiritual roots, where your family have been, and where you count yourself as a Derby person?
I'm a Derby lad, born and bred.
Okay.
And I just look at the circle of friends that I've got. Some people want to go to the big city, and they can't wait to get away from the city of their birth because they see that as a symbol of their progression. Yeah. Actually, you've got to move away from your hometown to show you've made it, and you've got to be able to make it in the big cities. Well, I tried a bit of that, and it wasn't for me. And actually, I was led back to Derby to be close to family, and actually, I thought for me it would be a much more comfortable, quality of life for me, and actually I believe I've made the right decision.
You when you were at university, you actually studied history, I believe, but you've got this penchant for politics. What was it that kind of moved you towards the kind of your political aspirations?
Well, if you speak to my friends from my childhood at school, but particularly primary school, and secondary school, they would hopefully say, I think, I'd like to think they would know me as somebody who was interested in art. Okay. So actually, my passion when I was growing up was art, drawing, the creative arts. But
was there an Indian thing that said you'll never make any money from being an artist?
Well, actually, my dad could be watching this, so I've got to be careful what I say. Look, my dad didn't particularly think that art could, and maybe he was right, because not many people make that transition into having doodling and drawing and figure drawing and painting to actually making loads of money.
How many rooms will you paint unless you're going to be a painter, but not painting?
So that was my kind of passion. But I have to say, I was always I was politicised in the 80s, and my dad, and again, I'm sure my dad wouldn't mind if I said that the only time that anybody was allowed to really swear in our household and get away with it was when Margaret Thatcher was on television. I think the number of Sikh parents that managed to that clearly Margaret Thatcher wasn't very popular with a lot of Sikhs. So certainly in where I grew up, that was the only time my dad, when he was having his roti, when Margaret Thatcher suddenly appeared on the news, news, it's suddenly something you forget we were there, would swear, and if but obviously if I swore, I would get a belt round the ear.
Yeah, there was a time when obviously there was quite a lot of polarisation around, particularly ethnic minorities. I'd imagine some people had it really good and thought Margaret Thatcher was brilliant, and others thought maybe she wasn't as good, and so on. And I guess that was manifested, as you say, by people. Sort of
well, the 80s news. You had the, I grew up in the miners' strike.
Yeah.
I grew up at the time of the apartheid featured very heavily on the news. So the 80s was an extraordinary period, and I was politicised. Although my dad wasn't necessarily a political activist, he saw a lot of change in his workplace as a postal worker. But there was this. I grew up with this clear sense that we were Labour supporters. But in terms of making that transition to going into politics, I think it was just this sense of trying to debate and to find our way in the world.
Right.
Because obviously the 80s, people from our background, ethnic minority backgrounds, and especially from Sikhs and Indian backgrounds, we were starting to find our voice. We were starting to knock on doors where formerly we would be shut out of. So whether it's in business or in the workplace or in politics or seeking that promotion, we were breaking barriers, and we were challenging those barriers. We were saying, actually, there should be more, Sikhs in politics. And City Hall, across the country, especially in inner city areas, in the 60s and 70s, there weren't many people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds, and particularly Sikhs. And because we know now, when the first Sikhs, when we talk about the first Sikh that became the first mayor, here in Derby, the first mayor of Derby, Mr. Dinser, very, very, very famous here in the city, very recognised. His son's now the police crime commissioner, Hardy Dinser. I think the only Sikh police crime commissioner from black and ethnic minority background, and that creates a sense of pride. And so I think. That conversation, that debate, leading to look, we can make a change. Our voice should be recognised. And you've got to understand, when I grew up, it was a time of the skinheads as well. So I've been chased. Not many people know that experience, but I've gone down to a neighbourhood. There were parts of the city where you didn't go to. Because Asians. You were almost kind of said, actually, in the local park I used to go to, beyond the parks there were these gates, and no Asians lived beyond that. And if you did go, and I remember we lost our dog. We had a dog, and it got lost, and I was going all over the city, but there's one part of the city I didn't go to, and but to go there, I asked my best friend, an English lad, and I said, look, I need a bit of protection, and can you come with me? And I was primary school age at the time, and I remember we'd gone down the wrong street, and suddenly these skinheads said, they did say that they said. They said, what are you doing down here? And I was being chased up the street. So I'm actually nostalgic about that story. I don't say that with trepidation, oddly. I kind of look back, because that was the times we lived in, and we got through it.
Yeah, they were. I think we've all probably, every Asian, every Sikh definitely has got a story about skinheads. I mean, mine's on my 21st birthday, actually getting a facial massage outside a pub, courtesy of the local skinheads, which was quite nice.
But making that journey into actually deciding to join the Labour Party. I mean, I joined the Labour Party when I was at college because I was doing some research project, and I thought, well, I just joined the Labour Party, and it was Young Labour at the time, and I was, but to make that then transition into thinking elected office, actually, I was living in Slough, where my wife and a Labour activist knocked on the door and started explaining to me about voting and politics, and I said, look, I'm a Labour supporter. But in the end, I ended up doing more of the talking, and when she was trying to encourage me to kind of get involved, I said, yeah, I'm happy to get involved. But at that stage, I think I don't know whether I kind of scared her a bit too much, and but after that conversation, I actually went away. I thought, yeah, maybe something I'd be interested in doing in the future.
I think all I remember of kind of like the Labour at college was they probably had the best gigs. Billy Bragg, UB40 were all the Labour gigs, and I don't think the other side actually had any gigs, so that probably would have swayed me. So in terms of, you obviously, the family didn't want you to become an artist, but when you went to politics, was there support both within the family and then within the Sikh community?
My dad certainly felt that it was, kind of quite a courageous step to take. Not probably sure about how it would probably end up, but it's just something I chose to do. I didn't really seek necessarily any advice or from the family, and in fact, actually at the time, I didn't involve my family that much. I kind of just went ahead and decided to stand, and I was very fortunate from when I made the decision to stand in my first election, to go for my first selection. I went forward and was successful and actually stood and won my election. So things kind of from there happened quite quickly, and it was only kind of years later that I started to involve my family. And my dad, as an ex-postman, retired, started to come out, and it's great having on your campaign team an ex-postman, because they could deliver letters as anything. My dad is absolutely brilliant, and my dad delivers letters actually in his training round. So when my dad first became a postman in the 60s, his training round actually is where I'm a counsellor.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm quite proud of that.
He knew the doors to avoid where the dogs were and stuff, so I suppose.
Yes,
and you'll get bit if you go there.
He has actually been. He told me a story the other day. Actually, he got bitten in a part of the ward I now represent, and so I've got the tips. I make sure I wear gloves when I'm out leafleting.
So, and around that sort of time, I mean, obviously you'll move into politics, and obviously there was a lot happening around, and you've spoken about the villains of the piece of politics, certainly in your own household. Who were the kind of heroes? Who were the kind of motivators, the inspirers politically? Were there figures that you'd say, wow, that person was somebody that really stood out, and maybe?
Yeah, there were quite a few actually. Obviously, looking at the 80s news again, you had people like Nelson Mandela,
right?
Martin Luther King, although he wasn't alive when I was growing up, but huge legacy, and you could not be inspired and hear about his influence, and obviously his influence was felt in many of the movements for change in the world, and also the people in the Labour Party. I mean, at the time, Neil Kinnock was the leader of the Labour Party, and again, by the fact that we were Labour supporters, you supported the leadership, and so I wouldn't necessarily put it down to one particular figure. But if you went into my office now, and the pictures I've now in my office at the council house, there's Steve Biko,
okay,
there's Mahatma Gandhi,
okay,
during the Salt March.
Okay.
And so, people that actually have come from very, kind of, some of them from ordinary backgrounds, but have gone through a course of action that they've actually taken on huge challenges, and actually changing the world around you.
So it's kind of going
from the establishment,
going from ordinary to extraordinary in terms of their outlook, and for everyone, not just for themselves. Because I know sometimes politics, and you see politicians all the time where, and particularly in this modern era where it's about a tweet and an ego, and I'm not going to mention an individual who tweets and has got a massive ego, but it's all about them and what they're going to do for everyone, as opposed to what they will do and they deliver.
Yeah, I've always believed that actually some of the biggest people that make impact in our world are ordinary people. It's ordinary people that often make the biggest change, that achieve extraordinary things. Rosa Parks.
Exactly.
She didn't choose to start that movement, that bus boycott during the civil rights movement in America. She was just an ordinary woman getting on a bus that for months and months, in her generation, she was told where to sit because of the colour of her skin, and she just decided on one day, actually, I'm not going to sit where you're asking me to sit because I'm black. I'm not, because it's not right. And others hadn't done that before then in the way she did, and she started a movement. And it's often the unsung heroes now that it's good to kind of take a moment to reflect.
So Ranjit, we often hear about broken Britain. We hear things are wrong, and as someone that's probably at the front line dealing with a lot's going on in the city, is it fair to say, would you say austerity has got a lot to answer for in respect of what's happening around Britain and people's lives?
Well, what sets Britain apart from third world countries, countries that there are no public services, children are denied, formal education or healthcare provision, where there are no sewage systems. Britain has some of the finest public services in the world. We're admired for that, and public institutions like the National Health Service and our education system, our local authorities, our police service, they are funded through taxation, and they are subsidised services. And what really worries me and many people in the country is actually we're going through a direction now, an ideological shift. Where actually, we're heading down a different route. That actually, we shouldn't be putting, funds into public services, and actually they should be out. There should be a different model, and I think the only way that can end is actually in a decline of services for very ordinary people, and it's all very well for the people, the wealthy, and those people have got access to finance and incomes.
So the shift, you think, away from public to private is something that scares you, the idea that people are being asked to kind of pay as you go almost for anything they used to probably get as part and parcel of a public service?
Well, I think for me as a socialist, the one way I can live in a capitalist world, and I, like anybody else, I like to have the nice things and have a good quality of life, is I'm able to come to that understanding by recognising that actually, we've operated on a kind of very mixed economy, mixed model here in the mixed economy of the welfare state, and a mix between private and public service.
Sure.
And I just think we're going down a direction which will see an end to British public services. You look at the state of the National Health Service, our police force, as a council, local authorities. In Derby's case, the city council during the course of austerity has seen its income drop by 50%.
Right.
And at the same time, the cost of providing services is going up by 50%. Trying to run any organisation on that type of business plan is at times it looks impossible. We are finding a way through that because we got to get on with the job, and I think that's where the kind of maybe the kind of Sikh spirit kicks in, and and those British values as well, where you kind of just say, look, rather than kind of moaning about it, we make our point, but we got to get on and deliver for the people, and we are working hard to do that.
So just moving it from a national to a more local level, a Derby level, which is where you've got more control and more influence on. What do you see as the priorities for the people of Derby? What are you kind of really majoring on to get for the folks here?
Well, I think making sure that on the one hand we respond to people's kind of day-to-day concerns, and I always say to my fellow councillors that I think the most important place to talk to the people we represent and to understand what their needs are, to listen to their concerns, is on the doorstep. Right. Ideally, sat in their kitchen over a cup of tea and coffee. I think that's where the most important work should be done. Getting to what they're really about, and what the root of their story is, and what their issues are, and listen to them. And through that, we can pick up a lot of the day-to-day challenges that people are facing, and through that we can come up with the right solutions. Those conversations we have obviously on a daily basis, and from that, what we've done here in Derby, which I think is we're very proud of, is we've launched 50 pledges. Okay. So rather than say, which we have been saying, that these are things we can't do, unfortunately, because of austerity, because of government cuts, which we're opposed to, and because let's be realistic, people don't elect people to say what they can't do. The people get that, I think. Many years into austerity now, people want to know, okay, times are tough, we've given ourselves loads of more challenges, now Brexit, people don't want a sense, they want a sense of hope, for the future, and we're looking to provide that by being clear about what we can do. So the 50 pledges are a mixture of where the big projects that we're going to build a new swimming pool here in Derby, spending £30 million on that, or we've just recently launched our own energy tariff. So we've joined a scheme launched by Nottingham City Council, which was the first local authority run energy company to help people save money on their gas and electricity bills. We've now joined that scheme and called our part of it here in Derby, because no right-minded Derby supporter would want to be promoting a Nottingham brand. So our brand is called Ram Energy, appropriately, and I'm very pleased to see, and it's great satisfaction that between me and my dad, we've delivered letters to all the residents I represent, and people actually, where those that are saving money are switching. So being able to help your residents save 200, 300, 400 pounds on their gas and electricity bills is one way we can help people in these tough times. So the 50 pledges are just a range of different initiatives, projects that are linked into to address the current challenges. So another one I can mention is free breakfast clubs. Okay. I visited a school on the site of my former school, because my former secondary school is no longer there, but there's a primary school there now. And when I became leader, I went to this school, and just it's quite upsetting to hear that actually, to learn the experiences of children coming to school having not had a breakfast in the morning, because the parents are making choices, and that is happening here in Britain. We went to one of the richest countries in the world, but actually there are children starting a school day on an empty stomach.
But pretty hard to learn when you're actually you are in that sort of state. I mean, thankfully, I'm sure you probably didn't experience it. I certainly didn't experience it. We're very fortunate in that respect to obviously come from family backgrounds where we were sent to school with a breakfast, able to have lunch. But
you got the shit that if you didn't eat your, remember, you got told off.
You definitely did. And sadly, there are kids out there that would probably take the slip rather and have something to eat. But unfortunately, like you say, their parents are making some tough choices.
Yeah. I could easily end up on the story that we found my sister's pencil case, and she used to put a roti in there under the table every time, so she got getting told off for that. But I'm sure, no reflection of my mum's cooking, of course.
I was going to say there could, exactly. I was going to say as long as there wasn't the subji in the curry actually in the satchel, then you're pretty safe.
But in terms of the breakfast clubs initiatives, so we've linked into, because obviously times are tough, we can't subsidise as a local authority. So, but what we've done is we're working very closely with entrepreneurs and businesses. So we've linked up with our local entrepreneur, herself a very successful Asian businesswoman, Kavita Oberoi, and who runs a training centre here in Derby, a very successful company. So we're working closely with her and Derby County Football Club to raise the funding we need to be able to organise and acquire the breakfast, and then and we as a local authority, then make sure that the breakfasts arrive to the children that need it.
I mean, outside of that kind of sphere of politics and so on, I mean, is there any other sort of job or career that that would really have interested or would interest you even now? That think, I could do that. That'd be pretty good.
Well, look, when I was
don't say my job, by the way. Go on.
When I was a kid, I was a $6 Million Man was on.
Oh,
and Steve Austin, and those of that generation will remember the moon landings when he went to the moon.
Okay.
So I the first thing I ever wanted to do was I wanted to, I suppose like a lot of our generation growing up then, I wanted to be $6 Million Man and go to the moon and do the moon landing. So I used to sit under my mum's sewing machine, because it used to have a table on, and that generation of my mum's generation of Indian mums used to sew their own clothes.
Of course,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's I think it's dying out now. Sadly, there's not many people doing that. So mum would, and she'd get the cloth and measure it up to you, and you have to sit there, and she'd, and so she used to have a singer machine. So when I was a kid, I wanted to do $6 Million Man, and I think a pilot. I was fascinated about planes, and I thought of want to be a pilot. But recently, I have to say, I've just done 2 weeks jury service for my first time in the Derby Crown Court. And as much as I tried everything possible legally to get out of it, including getting
got a note from your mum.
Well, I just thought they're just one of those things you get called up on, and they wouldn't want a public service.
Barack Obama's done jury service of late, so
he got dismissed.
Did he really?
He has not done it. Yeah, No, the judge dismissed him, and so when I got my call up, and it was like a call up. Actually, when I first got the letter, I thought I'd been summoned before the Crown Court. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? But then I looked at the letter. The novelty wears off after a while, and then the seriousness grows in. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get a case which I'm going to be stressed about, and I don't want to get this kind of case. I don't want anything emotionally, too taxing. Yeah. And then he thought, well, this is ridiculous. I can't be in the court in my hometown. So I wrote to the letter, which is the form they send you, and then they came back and they said, no, you've still got to do it. Then I got the council, one of their lawyers, to write a legal letter. And I'm still going to pull him up on this because I think he must have known there's no way I was going to get out of this. But he still produced the letter for me to the judge in a very lawyerly way. And I thought, yeah, that will do the trick. That didn't work either. So even when I got into the court, I made one last attempt at the time with the judge. But anyway, I've done my jury service. I'm proud to have done it. And I have to say I was absolutely impressed with watching the legal process in motion and watching these very clever people, and I just think they're the kind of the equivalent of brain surgeons. The judge, hugely impressive, the barristers, and I thought to myself, God, maybe I should have been a lawyer.
If anybody out there is, well, we hope somebody out there is watching, but if anybody out there is watching is interested specifically in kind of politics, particularly kind of at a local level, has got kind of a passion about wanting to help their community, because not everybody wants to maybe get on the national stage, but people want to sort of do stuff locally. What sort of advice would you give them? Where should they start? How should they get into local politics?
And I think you introduced it really well there. I think the first thing is there's got to be something you want to change. There's got to be a cause and an outcome you want to achieve. And I think some of the best people in politics have started very simply because they've had this idea or got an outcome they wanted to achieve, and they've chosen the political process to enact that change. There's many ways. You don't have to go into politics. There are many people that can change lives, and whether you're running a community centre, or in the workplace, and politics is just one way, and I think is making sure that you're picking the right, the right instrument, as it were, the right levers to enact the change you want. And if it is actually politics because you believe that actually there needs to be a change of legislation, or you need to be able to be able to have the constitutional powers that the privilege of being a councillor gives you, to change that, then so be it. But I think it's got to be based upon a vision that you want to be able to achieve. I think that's where when people get frustrated between the sense of career politicians to those who naturally go into politics. There's that big difference, because I think these times demand visionary politicians that actually are propelled into politics, like Rosa Parks,
for a reason, for a cause.
And like Martin Luther King, and I think they are. I just feel that maybe there's not enough of them about, or maybe there never were. Maybe they are a rarity, and but that's the biggest advice I'll give you is actually, it might not, if you've got a cause or an issue or way, you don't have to actually go into politics to make that change. Some of the most very inspirational people that I work with, I'm very proud to be close to and friends of, actually aren't in politics themselves, and they would never think to go into politics. And actually going into politics, they'd actually lose something. They are still changing the world around them. They're actually transforming the lives of young people. A close friend of mine, and I don't know, I've been doing a bit of name dropping, and a gentleman called Joe Russo, another unsung hero here in Derby. Runs a youth service provider, helping very, very disadvantaged kids. Kids are actually on the brink of offending or have offended, and very, very working with very, very difficult young people, and has done a tremendous work. And actually, I was in town with him one evening, and one of the lads he'd helped when he was a kid came up to him, and this person clearly has had a very difficult and at times troubled life, and he's made a lot of progress, I'm sure. But one thing he talked about in that moment was, God, remember that we used to come to the youth club, and it was great, anything I can do for you. And that is like 10 years later, and that is respect. that is real respect.
That's life-changing.
And I'm not sure many politicians can say, decades later somebody comes up to them and says, right, that is great. I'm sure there are people out there. I would hope a lot of the residents that would come to me and say, actually, not just decades later, but obviously when it comes to the election time, because ultimately you're asking people to vote for you on the things you're doing. So I think my advice would think long and hard about what you want to what your goals are, what the outcomes you want to achieve, and if it is going to be politics, mentoring is very key. I work very closely with the MP for Derby North, Chris Williamson, big Jeremy Corbyn supporter, and Chris does a lot of important work in the Labour movement and very active. But Chris was the council leader, was the leader of the Labour group here in Derby when I decided to get a bit more active, and I got very involved in working closely with Chris, and a lot of the way I do my politics and the engagement side of it, which I'm very proud of, is actually down to what I'd learned, and from the influences of the people I had, whether it's Chris and my other colleagues
so it's kind of
in the Labour Party.
Find your cause, find your issues, but also find people that can help you and support you and nurture you in that. So that's quite interesting. Now, there was the recent survey in the Guardian about the most influential, and I'm not big on the acronym BAME, Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic people, and you were named in there as one of the most influential in the UK. Now, what do you think of that, and how was it received by people around you that you appeared in that list?
Well, it came at quite an interesting time, because politics is at the moment, and especially social media, I think is a vehicle for it. It's very brutal. So a lot of your opponents, the ways they can express their dislike and anger and sadly at times hatred is through social media, and that's a big thing, challenge facing all public figures today, not just in politics, whether you're in sport or you're a celebrity, and I know there's been a lot of national debates on it. So and I suppose I'm no different to a lot of other politicians, where there are people that will put things on social media which isn't very nice to me personally, nice to my ethnicity, or nice to my family, and you've got to be able to kind of focus on the job. And so this came at quite a refreshing time, really. I thought, well, actually, when you sometimes feel the kind of I won't say the world's against you, but when you sometimes feel the establishment, particularly, and the local media, and our local media, the media have got to do a job, I suppose it was nice to be recognised, because I've just felt that I was when I became leader of the council, I broke a barrier myself, which I'm proud of. I became the first, not just the first Sikh leader of the council here in Derby, but the first one obviously from a black and ethnic minority background. And breaking those barriers is not just important from an ego point of view. I think when you break barriers, it encourages other people that they can do the same. So I was talking about in the council chamber, and particularly the narrative, the counter narrative, from people, especially some of the more racist conversations, and I'm not saying UKIP are a racist party, but sadly some of the people that supported it supported it at the time, and there was a lot of this narrative about Roma and immigrants, and and I found that particularly distasteful. I look at my grandmother, and if you saw my grandmother standing at a queue, and she's passed away sadly now last year, illiterate, got married when she was young, and you look at her, and I always talk about, she'd make a perfect poster of everything for UKIP is bad about immigration, because she didn't work much, and she couldn't read or write, but actually her grandkids are all doing extremely well, and I'm very proud of that. My brother works at Rolls-Royce, my kid brother, 10 years younger than me, earns more money than I do, drives a better car than I do, a very, very clever guy, he's a biochemist.
He's not in politics.
He's not in politics, absolutely. That's what that's why. So it was nice to be recognised in that way, and I guess, and I think it's an awkward one, because you don't go out and say, you want to say also that I should be recognised because I've done this, or I'm the first doing this, and I think but you do feel that pride in your sense, and you do want the community to be proud, but you also want your city to be proud. I'm not saying everybody's not proud, and I'm very proud of the community I represent here in Derby, and I've got tremendous support there, and I go on the doorstep on Sundays. But when you look at your critics, and what social media does, it makes your critic's voice seem all powerful.
Yeah.
When actually I think it's an echo chamber. It actually, from what I'm finding, and the elections will always have the final say. It's not actually resonating, to the people I represent, because what matters to them or how you can assist and support them. And actually, I'm very proud that I represent a predominantly white working class community, where people have taken me into their heart and they support me because they know that actually, I care about that community and I'm part of that community, and I want to work with them to transform, lives for the better, and I get that support. But I think it would just be nice to have that, that recognition, not for the point of view of my own self-gain, but to show that barriers can be broken, because if we don't have that recognition, then actually how are we going to encourage the next generation? How are we going to encourage that the next person from a Sikh background, or the next child from a Roma community that today is feeling embattled and not wanted and not appreciated, because they've seen the posters that UKIP put up during the Brexit debate that basically says we don't want you. And we felt that in the 60s and 70s. There was a bit of that around, and we've risen to that, and we are here with today.
So just going forward onto advice, and I'm sure there's lots of advice, as all Sikhs get advice and so on, whether it's parental or work or political. What's the best bit of advice you ever got, you think?
I kind of don't look back and think any particular person or has given me a particular set of advice. I think a lot of my values I've kind of acquired from all sorts of different people, different experiences. I grew up in a very English street. When we moved into our neighbourhood here in Derby, we were the first Asian family that moved into that street. And a lot of the influences around there were, there was a family called, Mr. and Mrs. Brown, that had a lovely garden, and I loved that, and I got a lot of, interest in flowers. There was Tom, the World War II veteran, had fought in North Africa, told me stories about, the wartime, his wartime experience. Never about the actual fighting. It's always about the heat and the dust and the food they ate. And real veterans, they don't actually talk about they rarely talk about the fighting. Or neighbours who was a binman. These are the people I grew up to respect. And so when I often hear people opinionated say things about me and my politics and my values, actually they haven't come from necessarily from the Labour Party. They've come from a very typical British street, from British people, and so my values are very, very, very British, and that's where I've got all my advice from. So when I dropped, I'll say this experience I had when I dropped some litter. This gentleman, this World War II veteran, his name was Tom, who up until then, very nice, always said nice things to me and said hello. I dropped some litter, and this gentleman called Tom came up to me and told me off. I mean, he made me feel that small. Somebody I respected tremendously, and I got it, And anyway, once he'd given me a real ticking off and made me, kind of humiliated me, he then kind of said, "Look, Bobby," he said, "Look, one day," and he predicted my future. And I was probably 6 years old at the time. He said, "One day you're going to be married, you're going to have kids, you're going to have a house, you're going to have this and that, and these things are going to be hard. You're going to have to pay bills. These things are not going to be easy. If you can't do a simple thing like put your own rubbish in the litter bin, how are you going to do all these things?
Wow, it's a great.
How are you going to do all these?" And I never dropped litter again.
Brilliant.
And that's a real story I tell people, and I tell especially kids today when I see them drop litter, I think that stuck with me to this day, and I never forgot that.
Good advice. We're running short on time at the moment, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go over some quick fire questions here. Just a little bit about yourself in terms of background stuff. Can you remember what the first piece of music you ever bought was?
Beethoven's Third Symphony.
Okay, so real deep into classical. Was that sort of early on, and has always continued, or? Well,
I went to a state school, but as typical of a lot of state schools, probably then actually, or is a lot of the teacher and the head, especially the head teacher in this case, was loved classical music very obviously well, very well learned, and so the head teacher used to play classical music, often Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and so I actually grew up. I was one of those kids. My classmates probably thought, "What the hell is this music?" Playing classical music to a bunch of working class kids. For me, it was like I was one of those probably those kids. Actually, I quite like this. So I think it was at a time, and I think from watching something on television last night at the proms, I think it was.
And kind of stuck with you.
Yeah, so I bought Beethoven's Third Symphony. I was quite impressed with the picture of Napoleon on the front cover. I think it was at the time, so I was studying history. So I thought I've got to get that.
That's, picture of Napoleon. Impressing anyway.
And I was playing up my Walkman. Remember we used to have I had the Walkman.
I remember vinyl, so I'm that old. And whenever you go to the sort of movies and the silver screen, is that something you're keen on? You've got a DVD collection, so is there a favourite Bobby film?
I got loads of films, including my Meet the Budgeon collection. I've got my Meet the Budgeon collection as well.
My wife liked that one, but not me. But anyway.
I think in terms of films that made a big impression, English Patient.
English Patient.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely. I like films that actually you watch it and you actually reflect on it for days after. Okay. It leaves a big impression. I just think the English Patient.
The hero in there, or one of the heroes is Naveen Andrews playing a Sikh in there.
Kip.
Kip. Yeah. There is quite a great bit when he's actually tying his turban.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, and he obviously lets his hair down in there and the olive oil on the hair and stuff. But you see some of that stuff. You think, wow, finally somebody on the screen has actually got hair longer than mine.
Yeah. Which beautiful film.
Was it?
And that's about lost love as well, isn't it? So he obviously falls in love, and obviously the romance comes from the film comes to an end.
It's great to see a Sikh guy getting the girl, terrific, as opposed to playing the villain. So, and when it comes to sort of a small screen and stuff, do you get a chance to watch much TV? And is anything what sort of floats your boat on the small screen?
Again, coming back to what I've talked about earlier on, it's about my fantastic childhood, the television. I loved 70s, 80s, 90s TV. So my collection, actually, what I do is I spend more time watching my video collection. Okay. So Fawlty Towers or Blackadder. Last year,
it's called UK Gold, by the way.
UK Gold. I watch them. I like to have the actual DVD. But last year I went through a bit of a rough time. I ended up getting tinnitus in my left ear, so I was going through quite a tough time. And 2016 was a very challenging year. Not just because of the politics. So my grandmother, who I was very close to, passed away, and then my mother had a few health conditions. So there was a lot of things was happening at the same time. And actually, it was Blake 7.
Wow.
Blake 7 that I turned to, and because you would have, anybody that grew up not in these times where you only had one television in the house, and you were a typical working class family, and if you're a typical working class Asian family where there was loads of kids, one television, and everybody wanted to watch a different program. You fought over the TV, and so I never got to watch the programs I watched consistently over a period. So Blake 7, which was over several series and several episodes, I only got to watch bits of it, and so I actually finally got to watch it, the whole thing from beginning to end. And I have two children, Sebastian and Constance, and my son would watch Blake 7 with me, and actually loved it. And that's just great.
That is good. That's good. I mean, there was a time, obviously, one TV. We did have 3 channels until '82 when Channel 4 came along, and so you're right. We weren't exactly sport for choice.
But I've mentioned the fact that and a lot of Indians now name their children with English names. And when I named my son Sebastian, my mother couldn't. My grandmother couldn't. My mother couldn't say it. My grandmother definitely couldn't say it. And again, combustion, and then say nay, sadale Sabira. I see Sabira kana. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people in my generation that because a lot of Indians are naming their children very westernized names. So we have an Indian name and obviously the Western name and then the Indian name.
Yeah, and like I said, I apologise. I've been calling you Ranjit. I should have been Ranjito.
Ranjito, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what about when it comes to, time-wise, do you have much time for books and reading and stuff, or is it all tend to be work-related?
I've got a small library. I got a lot of history books. Military history. I'm fascinated with military history. When I was growing up, my dad remember the book clubs?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and so my dad was typical, filled this form in and got all these free books, and from, you know, learning to cook to painting to car mechanics.
You got it free, then you had to pay for it.
You had to pay for them afterwards.
Then you cancelled the subscription.
One of the books was Mark Connell Foster's World at War. You know, with the famous the TV series, the book. And I remember as a kid just going through the pictures and seeing the kind of, yes, on the one hand, the very terrible pictures of obviously the Holocaust, but then, you know, also seeing, you know, pictures of soldiers and I just remember, to me it was real life history. So I you know, I just thought these people went through all the things as a young person you're interested in, you know, and you know, the heroes are made of, and hearing their stories, especially the soldiers during the war, whether it was the Sikhs that fought at Monte Cassino or you know, or the soldiers that fought at Arnhem or on D-Day, and it was real life. And so I got into history and got into those books because I thought that was real. That really happened.
It was an amazing series. I mean, that was Laurence Olivier narrating it, so it was quite spectacular. I remember seeing that. So just one of the things I often ask people, and you've answered some of these for me already. I ask about sort of people that you might invite to a dinner party. They'd be typically heroes and stuff, but you've kind of told me a lot about people like Nelson Mandela and Steve Biko. Can you think of any others that you might want to kind of break bread with?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
And I'm a big Barack Obama admirer, but I've got to, when Barack Obama became president, we were in opposition here in Derby, and myself and the leader of the Labour group, I said Chris Williamson, the MP for Derby North, we wrote to Barack Obama inviting him to Derby. Right. And actually some of my fellow councillors, there's a councillor, Fareed Hussain, who actually would go over, who actually took, some of our councillors went over to America and took part in his, you know, to help him in his election campaign. I've never had the opportunity to do that, and I'm a big admirer. So I'm a huge admirer for Barack Obama. I think, not without getting into too much of the politics, but if you look at Trump and you look at Barack Obama, I mean, for me, there's no comparison. And I still often, when I'm absolutely down and I look at what Trump said, and then I go onto YouTube and I think, oh my God, look at from what we've gone to, completely different. So we wrote to Barack Obama inviting him to Derby, and we thought, we must come to Derby in your tenure. And then I think I wrote to him again a couple of years ago on the back of some local initiative we were doing, commemorating a local link with Abraham Lincoln and American politics. So Barack Obama has not visited Derby, and it would be a dream come true. And if you've got the influence, now that he's got less responsibilities,
well, I got him checked off that jury. So you know what, I can make these things happen.
And we're like blood brothers here, because as I said, when I was doing my jury service and people were talking about him, and I said, well, I'm just doing my jury service, and obviously the judge dismissed him. I say it's a bit different if you're leader of the council, you're the former president of the United States. But I would love to be able to entertain Barack Obama.
I think the guy's amazing, and the politics aside, I just like the way he's an amazing orator, and I think anyone that, you know, for me, I mean, I love people with power voices and who can actually, you know, literally spellbind a room. And so, you know, as actors, I know Richard Burton was one of those guys that could literally, just through his power of his voice, doesn't matter what, the guy could be reading a phone book and you think, wow.
As somebody, and I think we're very similar here, we're both two people that like to talk a lot, but the thing about the thing about Barack Obama is he says a lot with very few words.
They're chosen, aren't
and
they?
that is the oratory.
The true power of that. And just before we wrap up, finally, I've got what is the legend that's Fishbowl. So this is a kind of self-inquisition. It's actually some questions in here. They're fairly random. Some have probably been creased here by other guests. I want you to pick them out, read it, and actually answer it honestly and truthfully. He says, trying not to laugh. So,
best book you have ever read,
there you go.
And why? I would have said Mark Connell's Foster's World at War.
Okay.
Because I used to read that from about 8, 9 onwards. And often until about kind of 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, I'd read, because I was like mesmerised with the actual account. So
I think we got a good reason for that one. Let's get a couple more out here. Wrap up.
What part of your body would you replace with a mechanical version? With a mechanical version, that's. Well, look, I say, given the fact I'm into $6 Million Man, it could be the bionic eye or the bionic legs. I would say the bionic legs.
Legs. Do you do any sport?
I don't as much as I should do.
Well, there you go.
And so the bionic legs, if I've got 10 minutes to spare in a busy day, I can just run 20 miles with the bionic legs.
Exactly.
And,
You mean you don't already run 20 miles? Go on. One more, we'll do one more of these. We were running short of time there.
If you could press a button and make one person disappear from the world, who? Oh, not very difficult. I have to say, sorry, Donald.
Yeah, right.
It would have to be.
Duck.
It'd have to be Donald Trump. It'd have to be Donald Trump. I'm afraid.
Okay. I don't think you're the first person that said that. And probably certainly won't be the last. I don't think he's finding many allies this side of the pond. So Ranjit, listen, it's been absolute joy talking to you today. Thank you very much for giving up your time.
Thank you. I'm honoured.
And obviously we'll keep in touch. Thank you for watching Late Night Banter with me, Del Singh. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Good night for now. Vaigu ji ka khalsa, Vaigu ji ki fateh.
Trust you enjoyed the banter. If so, join me next week for a charity special Late Night Banter, which was filmed at the Glassdoor Sleep Out, event for the homeless in London.